recording is on.
There we go. Fantastic. Well, good evening and welcome everybody here to our January 2021 ISC Squared Central Florida chapter meeting. Happy New Year to all of you. I think we're kind of getting to the end of that time frame where you can, start wishing people a Happy New Year, because hopefully by now we've seen everybody. But real excited that you were all able to join us and take time out of your busy and exciting Mondays to be here with us for the next couple of hours. I've got some fantastic presentations, people that are going to interact, chat with you, provide some great information. So let's get to it. Quick rundown of how we're going to go for this evening. Everyone's gotten connected now. I'm going to run through some opening announcements, give you everybody some updates, what's going on, some things we've got coming up later on this year. And then we'll have Clay Posey and Dr. Mindy Schaas present on the COVID and working from home and all that. And then after that, we've got Karen Worstell here with us. Really, really excited to have her here. Well, I'm excited to have all of our speakers here, but excited to have Karen here because she's coming all the way to us from the West Coast. So this is one of the interesting things of being able to do these meetings virtually. We can have folks that sometimes we may not have been able to have in attendance. So excited to have everybody here tonight. The West Coast would be, West Coast of the United States, not Florida. Sorry. And then we'll get wrapped up about 8:30. So real excited. Special thanks, of course, always to Andy Jalbert from 8x8. Andy, if I think you're on the call, why don't you give us 30 seconds, tell us about 8x8.
Yeah, thank you. 8x8, we're a global leader in unified communications and contact center technology. If tonight's about remote working, we're all about it. Provide a unified communications platform that's allowed millions of people to go remote in this pandemic. That entails cloud telephony, collaboration, and the video meetings platform you're on today. So appreciate you having me, and have a great show. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Of course, when we're back in the real world right now, we're kind of we're not really spending a lot of money because of what we've got with these virtual meetings. But I know that once we get back up and running again, we're going to be excited to be partnering with the local groups here and businesses here in Central Florida. I know we got Bob Henderson on. Go ahead and wave there real quick, Bob, from ISG. Real excited that he's able to make it, and the folks from Gold Sky and Fortress. We're looking forward to getting back in front of everybody and start doing those face-to-face meetings. Get those vaccines going, and hopefully by later on this year we'll be all back together, either at Valencia or ECPI or back up at Full Sail. We will see. So I know we've got some new folks here tonight. So first of all, welcome to you that are visiting or your first time attending these events. One of the things that ISC Squared chapters do that I personally take a lot of pride, a lot of enjoyment out of, and it makes our work a lot easier, but there are basically 4 pillars that our chapters are built on, and that's connect, educate, inspire, and secure. The whole concept of connecting, being able to network with colleagues and people from the community, that personal development, networking, career development. And then we provide some sort of education. So you're certainly going to get some tonight with the 2 presentations that we've got. And then hopefully that gets some sort of inspiration, either, look at inspiring, bringing that back into your own environment, or professional development. Sometimes we do some fundraising that comes out of it, as well as, of course, some sort of increased awareness in cybersecurity for you. And then there's secure element where, forming partnerships or working with the safe and secure online folks, collaborating on other cybersecurity awareness projects. So all 4 of those things is what makes up our chapter with what we're doing. Really quick, my name is James McQuiggan. I'm the chapter president. I've got Christopher Hickernell, who's our membership director. He's the guy responsible for getting the CPEs submitted for you. And don't worry, we're going to talk about those later on in the meeting. But and then we've got Walter Spielman, who's our vice president. Paul O'Connor is our treasurer, handles all the money. We got Debbie Carr, who's our chapter secretary, Amy Rooks, who handles sponsorship, and then Tom Plummer, who is our education director. All right, so let's talk about what's coming up. So usually this is a nice varied slide of evening events, breakfast briefs, other trainings, and so forth. Right now, we're just kind of slated for virtual meetings, at least through to June. If this changes, we're going to let everybody know. But right now, we're just kind of forecasting out about till June. But pretty well all of our meetings are going to be the fourth Monday of every month. So we're meeting tonight, and then February 22nd, March 22nd, and so forth. You kind of get the idea. But again, if any of this shifts or changes and we can go to real face-to-face meetings, then we will. A lot of that also depends on the schools. With Valencia, with Full Sail, once they start having those face-to-face classroom sessions, then we will probably look at getting back in there as well and have our meetings like we've had in the past. So next month, I'm really, really excited that we're doing this. Right now, I've got 4, and I think I had one more person that was interested. But we've selected the book Sandworm, and my copy's buried back there. But as a group, as a chapter, a couple meetings ago, we selected Sandworm, and we're going to discuss that next month. I'm going to have 4 panelists, but anybody's going to be able to discuss it. But basically, I'm going to moderate a panel of these 4 fine chapter members, and we're going to discuss the book Sandworm that was written by Andy Greenberg. If you've never read the book, fantastic. Look, it's deep insights into a lot of the GRU activities, the attacks on the Ukraine power plants, and the different things that were going on. So definitely, we're going to be doing that next month. And then the other part of the meeting, we'll do that for the first half. But the second half, I'm real excited. Dr. Jerry Ann Roberts, who is one of our chapter members, and she's she's joining us here today as well. But she's going to be giving a presentation that I do believe is based on her dissertation that she wrote for her doctorate, dealing with digital natives and their usage of antivirus. Really interesting, and I'm looking forward, and I think it'll be very informative for a lot of you folks. So she'll be presenting next month, and it's really good so far. So that's what we've got next month. That registration is now open on our Eventbrite page. I'll have the link at the end of the meeting, and then we'll update the website so you'll be able to, and then we'll send out the emails probably later on this week to get folks to register. But we got February lined up, and now we're working on March. So good things to come for next month. With regards to ISSA, ISACA, and CitraSec, I think I do know that the ISSA folks met earlier this month, and I'm not sure if they've got a February event. I didn't get a chance to see if Patrick was on, but check out their website. We're not the only game in town. There's a lot of other good InfoSec chapters, ways to get CPEs, ways to network. But Patrick, who is also one of our members, he is the chapter president for the Central Florida ISSA. CitraSec, I know they're kind of on hold as well as ISACA, but certainly check them out and see what's going on. All right, we're at 239 active members. We had a bunch of folks renew. We had some folks drop off, but we're still holding strong with our membership. Real excited and thankful to everybody that's here tonight and continuing to participate as chapters. One of the things that we've been asked for a long time, and I'm real excited that we're going to start working on this, is a CISSP study group. I know folks have been asking about one. But the way we're going to work it, and this is kind of what we've learned from some of the other chapters, is we're going to collaborate with our members that are already have their CISSP, and basically we're going to take one of the common bodies of knowledge, and we're going to do sessions based on that. We're still working out logistics. Most likely it'll be virtual at least sometime down the road in the next 6 months, but it'll be 1 or 2 folks that have their CISSP that'll facilitate a meeting, and then it'll be 4 chapter members. We'll be able to join in, ask questions, have discussions, those kind of things. But if you are interested in volunteering to help lead one of those sessions, or you're interested in being a part of the study group, send an email over to education@isc2chapter-centralflorida.org. I'll leave that up, or you can take a screen capture. Tom Plummer, who's our education director, He's going to be he is going to be spearheading the study group and getting that going for us. I know it's something that our members that don't have their CISSPs have been asking for. So we're going to be having that. We're working to get that up and going within the next couple months. We just want to get some interest, find out who's interested on receiving, but also we need facilitators. I know we got a lot of folks that are interested in getting their CISSP, but we need folks that can kind of help facilitate that discussion, those sessions with regards to the different topics. Training event. So we were supposed to do one back in December, I know, but we've got another opportunity. We're finalizing the details right now. We should have more information next month, but later on, probably April-ish, April, May, springtime. Tom had heard from a group that does these virtual events. It's a hacking 101. Most likely, we're going to be connecting into their servers, maybe through Amazon or AWS or Azure. Not sure yet. Still working logistics, but most likely something where you'll be able to do it from the comfort of your home. But it is a hacking 101 course designed for system administrators. Oh, something got in the way there. Web developers, IT managers. But it's basically going to be, hacking 101, web security, network security, Windows security, learning all those different concepts so that you know how to attack it and so forth. No prior experience is necessary. This will be kind of like a beginning hackers 101. So if you've got your CEH already, your certified ethical hacker, it might be a little simple for you, but we will have more information. Just kind of want to give everybody a heads up. We're continuing to keep the education going, and so we're working towards that. We also have the new group hubs sitting out on the ISC Squared community page, so community.isc2.org. You can go out there, register. We're going to start trying to use that for additional communication as well. You can go out there, free registration, don't need to pay, don't need to have a ISC Squared certification. Just being a chapter member, you can go out there, create an account, go out to the community page, and then join our group hub. You'll need to let us know what your name is that you've created out there, so that way we can invite you into the group hub that's out there. So community.isc2.org. You can let us know what the name is, and then we can go from there. If you got any questions, you can email us at info@isc2chapter-centralflorida.org. Cool. All right. So I've done enough talking. That's enough of what's been going on here in the area. I'm real excited to have Clay and Mindy here presenting to us. The topic is very timely with what's going on. So Clay, go ahead and unmute and go ahead, and I think you can probably start sharing the screen as well here. Let me stop sharing. There, okay, you should be, there we go.
Everybody, all right, are you able to see
I see your screen.
All right.
We see your slide deck PowerPoint. It's not in presentation mode. I'm not sure if that's important for you.
It's not, but you can see the screen. That's fine.
Okay.
So you can see it, is that correct?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, so James, thank you very much for having me here. I'm not sure if Minnie's going to be able to make it. She is a mother of some young children, and so part of what we're talking about here tonight with temporary work from home employees could very well be affecting her workflow tonight. But my name is Clay Posey. I'm a professor, associate professor in the Department of Management at the University of Central Florida, and also one of the core members of the relatively new Cybersecurity and Privacy Cluster Initiative at UCF. We also have 2 doctoral students who have been interacting with us on this project, and both of them, as well as Mindy, are out of the industrial organizational psychology division in the Department of Psychology. So before we get into the topic at hand and hypotheses and takeaways and everything, I do have to mention and acknowledge that we did receive financial support from the National Science Foundation. I'm also obliged to say that any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this material, in this presentation, are those of us and do not necessarily reflect the views of the government and National Science Foundation. So before I begin to talk about, our reason for this study and our findings, I think it's really important for me to provide a background of how I approach or we approach cybersecurity. So in the very middle here, and Bob, I know I presented to CSNP not too long ago, so a lot of this information is similar, but I do have some other important tidbits that have recently emerged from the data analysis. So I hope I'm not boring you. Gotcha. So in the middle, I've got this guy named Stanley, right? And so Stanley represents any type of employee, whether they have an IS or IT role, managerial role, or a traditional operational level employee. And largely when we think about cybersecurity, we really hone in or focus on those components underneath Stanley here with software, hardware, cryptography, ACLs, trusted platforms, so on and so forth. Well, hopefully those of you who are in the audience certainly understand that there are some psychological factors, some cognitive factors, and behavioral factors that fall outside the realm of the more technical approach to cybersecurity. So I'm not trying to discount the things at the bottom, but I do want to complement them with those factors that might reside on top of Stanley or be on his shoulders. So it could be the structure he works in, the policies, the support he gets from his supervisor or executives at the C-level suite, stressors, biases, you name it. So bottom line is that there's a digital domain and an analog domain. And my mind wants those digital, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Are your slides changing, or are you still supposed to be on the first slide?
They should be changing.
No, okay. Well, all we see is your thoughts on cybersecurity. That's where we are. We're seeing your, like I said, the PowerPoint program, not the actual presentation. So we're
right
on top of cybersecurity. So just give you a heads up.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me go to entire screen and see if this is better.
Okay. It's the same view as before. Okay. Now we got the presentation.
Okay, good. So in the middle, we've got this Stanley stick figure, if you will. And at the bottom are the technological components that we would typically assign to a cyber specialist. But from a cyber generalist perspective, we've got a lot more things to consider. And really, it's the forces that interact both from the analog domain and the digital domain that really impact the decisions that Stanley makes consciously or unconsciously. In addition to that, as we look at what a lot of organizations really try to hone in on, is they want to focus on how do we deter Stanley from doing an office space on our systems, databases, actual workstations, files, whatever, networks, you name it. And so a lot of what we have is ingrained in our policies and procedures is a framework foundation coming from a criminological approach, i.e., how do we deter people from doing bad behavior? Well, those of you who've seen me present before, you know that I always like to say, most people don't go into their organizations every day and say, how can I screw stuff up? They just really don't do it. And if they do screw stuff up, there are a few malicious bad apples, if you will, but I would argue that there are more bad barrels than there are bad apples. So with that being said, our research approach not only looks at the analog factors as well as the digital factors, but also try to look at it from a more holistic approach with Stanley and his colleagues, is that we need to look at things from a positive psychology approach, i.e., how do we motivate the things that are good to keep them in a protective mindset, as opposed to only writing our policies and procedures from the mindset of how do we get Stanley to not do something bad, right? It's two totally different approaches. So that's kind of a high level approach, a way we look at cybersecurity. So now on to the presentation. That COVID has certainly taken a toll on a lot of individuals. Lives have been lost. Work has been really upended in our workflow. Some of you are watching this presentation with children in the background. And I'm sure one of my 4 will probably walk in here tonight and perhaps interrupt. But that's largely the world in which we live. And so this study is really about taking a look at these, what we call temporary work from home environments, and how they have truly impacted workflow, how they've impacted the way that organizations have handled the pandemic. We find a lot of evidence that most organizations were simply not ready to handle this significant amount of a number of employees working from their home environments, and they've had to change a lot of stuff and learn by trial and error along the way. So there's a lot of stressors, organizational, personal, just lots of things changing. So the bottom line for this research project is actually, looking at those things and trying to gauge if and how it has truly influenced things that ultimately impact the cybersecurity for organizations. So the way we started off is when we have a project, when we don't know what we're going to find, there's no theory that we come in and say, here's our model, and we're going to either try to falsify it or prove it. In this case, we just don't know what has actually happened. So we started off with qualitative interviews with about 36 individuals from numerous industries, local government, utilities, education, software, tech, and roughly even 17 women and 19 men. And the interviews lasted for about 30 minutes, and they were semi-structured. We had a protocol that we followed so that we could compare and contrast among them, but we left it open-ended as well. So we found some interesting information, but one of the checks that we wanted to see was that we wanted the significant amount of time working from home now than they were before. We wanted to really capture those individuals whose workflow and work patterns were truly upended. So the amount of time that our participants spent working from home, both before COVID and during COVID, was 10%, then going to 95%. So we've got the right sample there. It's interesting when we talk to these individuals about working location. Now, they mentioned working from office space, makeshift office in the bedroom, going outside in the sunroom, going on the porch, whatever. Oddly enough, they didn't mention the bathroom. And I know they're lying because some people do work in the bathroom, but I don't know if the work location in someone's house is important, depending on the information that your employees are working on. But something I like to do is say, Alexa, what's the weather tomorrow? And see how many Alexas actually go off in the 40 or 50 attendees here. I'm not claiming that Amazon is listening to everything we say, but it does give us pause that even in our own home, we need to be careful of the location from where we work. And then we had a pretty wide variance in the ownership of the digital devices. It was, I would say it was probably 40-40-20. 40% of the individuals used devices that were given to them by the organization. 40% were purely their own devices, their personal devices. And then the 20% was a mixture. And I don't know exactly how that is going to work out in the future, but we'll see what happens with BYOD moving forward. So if we just take a look at workflow, and many of you could probably agree with the patterns that we're finding here, is that most of the people, well, all of the people who answered this question said that they had many more non-work distractions or interruptions and fewer non-work, but they have fewer work distractions and interruptions. It's almost a toss-up between the number of interruptions that they get from non-work that they save from not having work-based distractions. And then you can read these here. I'll get into them a little bit more here in a little bit. But it's interesting with efficiency and effectiveness. We found quite a good number of individuals who said that they were less efficient, but as effective, if not more effective, And it seemed like that was largely due to their workday being spread out over more hours. So if they typically worked from 8 to 5, they might start at 6:30 and then at 9:30 go and see their, well, if their children were face to face in school, they would go and visit with them, have lunch with whatever it is, that their day was elongated, but throughout the day there were multiple things that broke it up. And a lot of the times that was of their own choosing. So it seemed they felt like they were less efficient with their time overall throughout the day, but some of them even felt more effective. When we asked the participants about organizational responses to what was going on, it was pretty interesting. So we asked them the cybersecurity policy that they were operating underneath as they worked from home. Was it formed before COVID, or was it formed due to COVID, during COVID? And so we say about 50% formed before COVID and then 38% in response to COVID. A work from home policy altered during COVID. 44% said no and 38% said yes. And so those of you who are fairly decent at math would say, well, those aren't 100%. They approach 80 or 90%, but they're not 100%. So what happens? The individuals who said something else, this was their response. I don't know. And so I don't know if that's a great answer, because maybe they don't even know about the cybersecurity policy. We'll look at that in just a little bit. But the reason why this is important is the first group of numbers signals that, there was a significant number of organizations that weren't prepared from a work from home standpoint, telecommuting, if you will, telework, when COVID came around. And then even among those that had a cybersecurity policy that was formed before COVID, we still had some being altered as it went throughout. And so the reason why this is important is these organizational employees' environments have been significantly upended and their workflows changed in a significant manner. We want to try to minimize the number of times we introduce even more change to their jobs. Okay, so that's one thing to remember here. Due to time constraints, I'm just going to go through these very, very quickly. There are some quotes in here about looking at the cybersecurity policies as they work from home. There's pros and cons with everything. I look at technology like I look at money. It can make good people better and bad people worse. And so the pros were, it seemed like it was less difficult to follow for some people. They were more relaxed in their home-based environments. The organization seemed much more focused on cybersecurity, so it was easier to follow. And then some people even said it was less invasive. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there were a handful of individuals who felt because they were working from their own home office or their home locations and their home networks, those individuals seemed to be even more sensitive to to perceived invasions of privacy. Now, whether they're invasions of privacy or not, from a legal standpoint, honestly, it doesn't matter, because perception is reality when it comes to employees. So there were a handful of individuals who did believe that are more sensitive to invasion of privacy, and that largely stemmed from them working in their home environments. Some people felt like the new constraints on them to get access to certain things through VPNs or had to wait till their cybersecurity team signed off on downloading an app that they need to do. We saw quite a few instances of shadow IT for sure. They just felt like it was more difficult to follow. And then some individuals felt like they were less focused, not less focused because the organization was less focused, but less focused because you had children running in and out, right? And things happened and family members got sick. So all of these are important. So from the interviews, the stage one of this research, some of the takeaways is that these employees that have been affected from us, that have been affected from COVID and are now temporary work from home, they work in a variety of locations in and around the home. I don't know if it matters to you in your organization if there is a device that's always listening. We found quite a few instances of where employees and their spouses would have to kind of jockey for time in the office because they were both working on sensitive material, and that those trade-offs came up fairly often. There was a concept that we refer to as time chunking that came out to be a significant issue, and that's the ability to take your day and break it up into 15 or 30 minute snippets of time and constantly being able to change your focus. And so that was the big thing that emerged from our interviews. It seemed like those individuals who were accustomed to doing that, or who at least could learn to do that and felt comfortable doing that, always changing their mental model and focusing on this here, this here, this here, and jumping around, they seem to do a little bit better in adhering to cybersecurity policy. The variation workflow, as we would expect, a big trade-off between efficiency and effectiveness, it seemed. And then I mentioned Byod policy. So I don't know what it means if and when, and hopefully we get back to normality or some level of normalcy in our traditional work environments. But for those of you who are in organizations with Byod policies, it's going to require a thorough spring cleaning of the devices that come in, because we've got a lot of individuals who are using or their children and their spouses are using the technologies that they have for their job there for various things. I don't know if you're willing to admit it, but maybe I shouldn't, but there are a lot of new games on my tablets and my other mobile devices that I know I didn't download, and I can point to one of my 4 children for that. Okay, so that's the qualitative study. And I can't see the chat because I'm in the browser and I can't see faces, but I will be opening it up to Q&A. So please write your questions down, and at the end we'll discuss them. So we took what we learned from the interviews and said, well, let's try to put some metrics around it, collect some quantitative data to see if we can find out what's important and what's not, as we expand from our handful of 36 participants into many more. So what we did is a very longitudinal study, in that we I don't want to say followed like stalking followed, but we interacted with participants through daily surveys over a 2-week time period. So we had an initial survey, a demographic survey, let's say on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and then the 2 weeks consecutive after that, at the end of every workday for 10 consecutive work days, they would fill out a very short survey. And what this allowed us to do is to look at various fluctuations in whether they thought that the cybersecurity policy impeded their daily workflow, whether there was something new that came up at their job, maybe there was an organizational breach, so on and so forth. So the rest of the data that I show in this presentation come from these new surveys rather than the interviews. And so there's going to be a lot of charts, and I just put it on here for conversation. Percent of work accomplished. Most of the time, if we look at it from an average standpoint, most people said they were able to get the same amount of work accomplished that they set out to for that day, 100%. There were some days it was less. There were some days it was more. Another interesting thing that we saw in our conversations during the interviews is that some people believed that their work from home environment was more secure than their organizational environment. And oddly enough, it looks almost normal here, normal distribution. And so that might be an important data point for you to assess whether you're in an organization, is whether people think that their home-based environment is more secure or not. Remember, it doesn't matter if it is right now. Their actions are dependent on their beliefs about what they perceive to be true or perceive to be not true. So a rhetorical question here for you to think about is, since COVID, how many breaches in confidentiality, integrity, availability, or whatever has your organization experienced? This is rhetorical. Don't out yourself in your organization, but how many breaches have you experienced? And we can compare it to here. So The vast majority of the employees believed that their organization has not been influenced adversely by a breach in cybersecurity. And then we have it tail off a little bit. For some reason, we had 2 or 3 individuals put in open text that they had been hit by 13 breaches since COVID. Now, whether that is true or not, I can't verify that, but that would be fairly scary there. Here are some things with changes in workflow. We see on average, people believe they're collaborating less with colleagues. There's a lot of Zoom meetings for sure, but what we are doing is that we tend to create issues where issues didn't normally exist, i.e. we have meetings, but when they were face-to-face, we padded, we put in 5 or 10 minutes between the meetings so that we could walk to a location, so that we go to the restroom, get coffee, whatever it is. But with our Zoom meetings, or 8x8 meetings, we are very much butting up from when one meeting ends to the very next, and we're not leaving ourselves a lot of time. And so that's an issue. But collaboration with colleagues, people don't feel like they're able to, walk down the hall and chat with somebody. They have to send a message through Slack, or they have to wait for some answer in Microsoft Teams, and they feel like less collaboration.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that X axis? Is that like a subjective scale, like strongly disagree, strongly agree?
Yeah, so that is correct. So okay. It's a Likert type scale. So a 1 right here would be strongly. I strongly disagree that I have more collaboration. To 7, I strongly agree that I have more collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So non-work distractions. Yeah, we've gotten more non-work distractions, fewer work distractions though. But here's an interesting thing is that it's skewed. Certainly with job autonomy, people believe that they have more autonomy in the way that they do their jobs. And that seems largely true and resonates with the other information that we've been finding, is that organizations, for the most part, have said, I don't care how you get work done, just get it done. Some other charts, fewer, more limited access to resources, but more amount of work in general. Just like autonomy, they think their schedule is much more flexible. And we saw a significant number of people mention this who are commuters in large metro areas, essentially really applauding that they can work from home and save a buttload of time not having to sit in traffic in a job. So efficiency and effectiveness look very similar to each other, more efficiency and more effectiveness when it came to the surveys. And we think that's partially due to the increased autonomy and schedule flexibility. So what does this all mean for cybersecurity? So when we asked the individuals, looking at all of your activities today, so these are the daily surveys that they report on when they get home from work or get done with work. We asked them, what percentage of your work activities today did you adhere to your organization's cybersecurity policies with exactness? You didn't deviate, and deviation can be malicious, right? But most often it is, I just wanted to save time. I had something come up and I just wasn't paying attention. So most people said, 100%, but here's the average is 94.7% adherence with exactness. And so I asked this of you, and we can discuss it later. This is 1 in 20. Is 1 in 20 good enough when it comes to adherence with exactness? So now the second question I have for you is the reasons why people fail to adhere to cybersecurity. And given cybersecurity policies and given the amount of time, I'm just going to go into this. Most of the time when I ask professionals in the space, many people just will give a blanket statement, oh, people are stupid, they're just being people, right? Stop doing that. But other people will say they're trying to harm the organization. So here, if we look at 13 various reasons for why individuals said that they didn't adhere to it. So anytime they indicated less than 100%, we would ask them why. And it might not be what you think, or it might be what you think. By and large, the first one is to better accomplish tasks for my job. And then to get something I needed, which falls along the lines of when shadow IT comes around. And then the one in third place is to help others get their work done, which was an interesting thing that we didn't expect to find. So a lot of this is I'm just trying to do my job, and cybersecurity is just getting in the way, right? If I were to ask you where truly malicious to get back from some perceived injustice to harm the organization, that's one here. And I know there are some social desirability issues and them actively, outing themselves in that regard, but the data show that it's largely not to do it to cause harm. They're just not adhering to do something that their job has asked them to do. Other reasons for not complying, I particularly like this one because it impedes productivity, and the only concern is my laptop being stolen, which isn't really a concern. This individual didn't think that losing their corporate laptop was an issue. Absolutely is an issue. It would have taken more time, and I was bored was also an interesting but scary thing for us to come across. So interesting correlations, attitude, and this thing called mindlessness. We're writing a paper from this data on mindlessness. And what that essentially is people on autopilot. They'll do things during the day and they won't recall doing it. And so typically I'll ask the audience members, when you drove home from work or you went to work this morning, did you really plan out the way you went? And can you think back to, the cars that were in front of you or automobiles that were to the side of you that caught your attention? Most of us would say no. Heck, I can't even remember what I ate for dinner last night. But mindlessness is a big issue. So when we separate both positive behaviors and negative behaviors, if you remember Stanley shaking hands being good, or Stanley with a baseball bat breaking stuff apart, we found some interesting correlations. This is not causality, but just correlations. In my presentation to Bob's group, his audience members asked us to go back and look at some demographic variables, whether they were in an IS or IT role, whether they were in management, and age. So I can't remember the colleague's name on here who just is either working on her dissertation or just finish it up on digital natives. But we did capture age. And so what's interesting is we found a significant, though relatively small, correlation between age and protective behaviors, i.e. the older the group was, the more protective they were. If we contrast that with the negative side of the Stanleys that we have, privacy invasion, constant changes in the environment, i.e. alterations and updates to cybersecurity policy. But when we look at, if we compare this and contrast it with the positive role, the negative behaviors in what we call internal computer abuse, doing something to cause harm, we see some interesting correlations. So the individuals who were in the information systems or an IT role it was significant correlation between those individuals and them admitting that they wanted to or either did do some abusive behaviors and try to hide some things. Managers also said that indicated they were more likely than non-managers to do some abuse, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Age right here with the digital natives. The digital natives, the younger they were, the higher the potential computer abuse. That's what that negative correlation means there. So they're less likely to engage in positive behaviors and more likely to engage in abusive behaviors. And then sex, whether someone indicated they were male or female. Oddly enough, the females indicated that they were more likely to abuse the computer system than their male counterparts. Now, I can't say that as a blanket statement overall, but we did see some significant variation in non-work distractions from our female counterparts that could end up impacting their workflow impediment and everything, therefore causing them to engage in these behaviors. So there's a lot of things in between point A and point B that we have to look at. So final takeaways. We have to look at our workflows. They got to be considered. Got to be careful about perceived invasions of privacy. When it comes to positive behaviors, attitude is almost everything. And attitude in this case, I'll say as a proxy for this, is the legitimacy of what you're doing. It is not enough to push out a new policy and say, thou shalt do this. It's not enough. You have to take the time to explain why. If you fail to explain why, individuals look at that new thing that you just developed, no matter how much time and money you put into it, and if you don't tell them why, the reason why you're doing it, they don't look at it. They look at it as less legitimate than if you took the time to explain it, which certainly impacts their attitude. Younger employees a bit more likely than older ones to engage in abusive behaviors, but also so are managers and those in IT or IS role. And we think this is possibly due to significantly higher perceptions of competing demands and the changes in their job functions or characteristics brought on by COVID. Try to encourage employees to take a break from being in front of digital devices all day. Try to provide them with interesting options for breaks to decrease this mindlessness, so on autopilot. And I point out the age there relation with mindlessness. So the younger they are, the more mindlessness activities that they reported. And then interestingly, the final takeaway is when we looked at the chart of the reasons why people did not adhere, said that they did not adhere to the cybersecurity policy, the third highest one or most frequently reported one is to help others. Due to that, I would strongly encourage you to have employees revisit business email compromise scams, given that they're not adhering to standards to help others in their network. Finally, shameless plug here on my part, forgive me. UCF just started a new graduate certificate in cyber risk management. The students in the first cohort, they're going through their final and third class. And so we are currently open and looking for external speakers to engage with our students among all of these topics of interest. So I'm happy to send these to James, if allowable, for any individuals who would like to speak to our 8 or 10 individuals in our initial cohort. They are working professionals, but looking to get in to the cybersecurity domain, and the class is cyber management and leadership. And so here are all the concepts there. And with that, let me stop my screen share, and I am open to any questions.
Cool. Let's see. Before I get into the questions, I will. Can you drop your email address into the chat, Clay?
Sure.
So that way, folks, if they're interested, right now they can get the information and respond. Great, cool. Thank you very much. That way, if anybody's interested, because I'll email you about the security culture organization stuff, because I got a whole slide deck on it.
Okay.
From what I do with my day job. So
Gotcha.
So Eric had a question. Was there any online training for some of the concerns?
Online training for the concerns so we trained the individuals in our survey who were participants, or the organizations were training the participants?
You can unmute, Eric, if you want to kind of further your question. Organizations.
Okay. We did capture the medium used, the communication channel used to train. And so I think we've got 14 different modes of communication, whether it was through email, whether it's through online, virtual training, whether it was face-to-face. So we have not looked at, I've got the correlation table here, but I'm going to run out of time. Is there something in particular with the medium of communication that you would be interested in with that question? Or is it whether they just did it or not?
We'll see if it's there.
Okay.
You can unmute, Eric, if it's easier for you. I see Mindy finally joined us, and she got her camera going there too. So
Whether they did it or not,
whether they did or not.
I don't have that right now, but I can certainly send that information to James, and he can send it out.
Okay. And Eric, you've got his email, so if you want to follow up, you can do that as well. So that works.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
It was interesting. You were talking during your presentation, Clay, about the whole, thinking, the quick thinking and everything else. And that kind of ties back to a concept I talk a lot about with social engineering and phishing, and why it's successful with regards to that type of Daniel Kahneman's concepts of system one thinking that's extremely quick and error prone, where you got system two, it's thought. It's very it's used for working out problems, but it's a lot more intensive. So I thought that was really cool there. So it's cool that it's like good. It validates what I talk about. Okay, good.
Yeah, no. So Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky with their System One, Thinking Fast and Slow is a great book.
Yep.
Here's our issue, especially with academia, and I know those of you who are in the professional world. Sometimes you look at academicians and you're like, you're in your ivory tower. You don't understand. That's fine. That's perfectly validated. And that's the reason I like to get out here and get down from my ivory tower and speak to you. So one of the issues that we have in academia is we lock on to rational theories. And especially if we come in from behavioral economics, we think, oh my gosh, whether someone clicks this or not, they're weighing the cost, they're weighing the benefits, and do the benefits outweigh the cost, and they'll do that. Most people don't do that. And most of it now is habit, it's habitual thinking, if it's thinking at all. So
creatures of habit.
Yeah. So the mental calculus, absolutely. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Cool. Awesome. Any other questions for Clay?
I know that was a lot of information.
And you're going to get me the deck, so I'll get that out to everybody else as well. Considering the percentage who felt work from home was more secure than inside corporate environment, does that show some companies need to revisit their way to create security awareness, as they had to do by changing workflows to?
It's possible, and here is something that I would certainly recommend if you are responsible for security awareness programs within your organization. I would strongly, if you're feeling like you're not getting a lot of buy-in from your employees, train them first on how they can protect their home environments, and then go to the organization's environments. And in addition to that, I know this is not specifically related to your question there, Antonio, but frame your statements to your employees rather than don't let anybody get access to this database because it will harm the organization. No. That database contains sensitive information about people who are like you as an employee. So if they have their identity stolen, don't think about the repercussions necessary. Don't go immediately to the repercussion to the organization. Go to that individual in that row in that database and put it in that mindset or that perspective for that employee and go, Judith, she's going to have these repercussions, and Judith is just like you, and you wouldn't want that to happen to you. And those are kind of the two simple things that I think need to be done within organizations, and there's a lot that don't yet. And especially if you're having trouble getting buy-in from your C-level executives, go ahead and don't be a stalker, right? Because that's just not good. But if you're having trouble getting buy-in from your C-level executives, go ahead and do a risk profile on their children's social networking accounts and bring that to them, and then talk about whaling and everything, and that will certainly get their attention.
Oh yeah, definitely freak them out too. Cool. All right, I'm just going to share. I want to bring back up my desktop. We kind of just as Clay was talking, he mentioned about CSNP, the cybersecurity nonprofit group. I had the pleasure of presenting, I think, the meeting before Clay, then Clay presented recently, and Bob has got an event, I think, coming up in February. So there's the link. So if you all want another great opportunity, either for CPEs, networking, some education, Bob Bob's got the announcement coming out later, I think in the next week or so, with what's happening next month. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is going to be one you want to attend. So keep an eye out on that website, csnp.org/Orlando. I think you can register as well or sign up to their group. But February, they're going to have a fantastic presentation as well. So cool. All right. So I am real excited. Coming all the way from Denver, the Mile High City, not full West Coast. But coming to us from Denver, real excited that Karen was able to join us. I did a presentation with her in December, along with some other colleagues, and just her message and her experience and what she's going to share with us tonight, I think is real important. She's been a CISO a couple times, for some small companies like Microsoft, AT&T, but the cool thing is she's been a chapter president for a security chapter, so she knows the trials, tribulations, and how much fun these meetings are. And of course, an adjunct professor. So kind of like our other presenters and myself, presenters. She's got a YouTube channel, a link tree. I'll put those in the chat so you can check those out after her presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my desktop here. Let me see. I think I've stopped sharing. So Karen, if you've got slides that you want to share.
I'm still muted.
You're muted there.
I'm muted now. There are no slides. I wanted to see everybody's beautiful face. It's for those of you who have put the...
No slides?
No slides. Yeah, no slides tonight. Well, because you know what, this is a relational presentation, conversation, and I'd love to make it interactive. So in order for me to see you, I'm going to not be looking at a slide deck. I hope that's okay with everybody.
That's fine. And if folks want to, they can turn their cameras on. They can do that too, so Karen can see.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
No pressure. No solid requirement.
Yeah, no, and I don't want to invade anybody's privacy. But you did set off my Alexa, so. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk with you. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. I have had my share of interactions throughout my career where I thought things were really just a little bit kind of a special sort of crazy. And I've had my own experience with burnout, which I'm not going to go into a whole lot here tonight. I'm happy to do that another time or in a private conversation with people who really want to know. But I am on a mission really to help keep cyber professionals healthy and to keep them doing what they do, because there can't be, in my mind, a more important role to the world than what you do. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about. And what I'm going to do, just to frame this up for you, is I'm going to give you a lot of information about burnout and about what you can specifically do about it. But I'm going to do it in the context of a case study that was one of the more interesting projects that I had the opportunity to do in the course of my career. So if you have, I'm going to ask for your interaction in the chat as we go through this. So I would love to see your interaction in the chat, and I would really like to have your questions. So as you come up with them, I can see them in the chat. I've got my eyes on the chat. So if you've got any questions that you want answered, I'll be happy to do that. We'll definitely have time at the end. So this story starts when Bell South and Southwest Bell made a bid to purchase AT&T Wireless in order to merge it with Singular Wireless. This was going to be the largest cash acquisition in U.S. history, $41 billion cash. It was also the first year of Sarbanes-Oxley rules for accelerated filers. I was at AT&T Wireless at the time as the VP of IT Risk Management, and we were one of those accelerated filers. So for those of you who've been through Sarbanes-Oxley, you kind of get the picture. The first accelerated filers had no guidance whatsoever. We had to totally make it up as we went. As part of the terms and conditions for this acquisition, AT&T's IT organization needed to pass its first Sarbanes-Oxley controls audit with 0 deficiencies by the date of the acquisition, which was 10 months away. And the reason for such a stringent requirement was that we had a massive CRM deployment failure. It was a CRM project that had been underway for almost 2 years by the time I joined the company. And 3 months after I joined AT&T Wireless, they were supposed to go live with this new CRM. And the CRM system in a wireless company is the heartbeat of the company. It is the thing that activates your phone. The reason, so when they had this huge CRM failure, and it says, "Oh, can you hear me okay?" Okay, so I'm getting a note that says my microphone is kind of noisy. So when this CRM failure happened, AT&T Wireless lost $350 million in 1 calendar quarter. Had we done a closer examination of the state of IT prior to the rollout of that CRM system, what we would have understood was that we had a very grim situation. So for those of you who are in the cybersecurity and controls environment, you're going to appreciate, we discovered that our infrastructure was obsolete, no longer supported by any vendors. Our incident monitoring and configuration management capability were woefully ineffective, and they were unable to detect the multiple whereas sites that were running in the data center. Our data center was split effectively between 2 sites, one of them in the Pacific Northwest sitting on top of a major earthquake fault. The other one was in a location in Texas that was in the heart of Tornado Alley, and neither had backup and recovery capability that would satisfy our business recovery target. We were a company of about 3,000 employees at the time, and we had several major critical applications with 68,000 user accounts, and the identity and access management infrastructure consisted of 38 separate identity and access management systems with 3 different systems of record. So I'll sum it up this way. Trying to dress this up for an audit would be like putting lipstick on a pig. This is about the time that I coined the phrase that we should stop trying to put steel doors on grass shacks. We would have to re-engineer the entire IT systems control from the bottom up, from scratch, in 10 months, and get it exactly right to pass the audit on the very first try. We had 0 time to test and remediate because of the 10-month time frame. So it was truly all or nothing. This was like, I like using metaphors, as you'll probably see as we go through this. And I would say this was close to doing open heart surgery on a patient who was awake and walking around, because AT&T Wireless still had to run and operate in order for the merger and acquisition to even be valid. So the reason I tell you this story and set this scene is because I referred to this project a little bit like the Baton Death March. Not to disrespect what that really was. That really was a terrible historical event, but the intensity and the duration and the unceasing level of pressure on the whole team to get this done was the perfect setup for burnout, but we didn't have any. And so it was the lessons that we took away from that, of a team that could successfully complete this project without the casualties along the way, that I found that was particularly interesting. Yeah, beatings will cease when the morale improves. Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, that was so, well, we made it. And we all lived to kind of talk about it and tell about it. So when the first question, when I learned that we had to pass this Sarbanes-Oxley audit in 10 months, to give you an idea of where I was at the time and how much I knew about SOX. When we knew we had to re-engineer all of IT in order to meet Sarbanes-Oxley, my first question was, what is SOX? and when my boss turned to me and he goes, now, how are you going to make this happen? All I could say to him was, I have no idea. I don't even know what it means yet. I guess you'll just have to trust me. So I don't know if this creates a queasy feeling in the pit of anybody's stomach, but if you get a queasy feeling from listening to a story like this and imagining yourself in my position, you can just go ahead and put "I do" in the chat. So I know that you as a professional have had that moment where, the feces is going to hit the fan, and you know that the responsibility to turn things around is on your shoulders. This could be at work, and it could now be at home. So, and here's what I know for sure. As professionals in information security and controls and audit, we all have one thing in common. We accept that the buck stops with us. We are all of us, ordinary people doing extraordinary things every single day, one day at a time, day after day after day. And we are somehow capable of running a marathon only to cross the finish line and have our boss greet us at the finish line and says, "That was fantastic. I need you to do it again." This all takes a tremendous toll. So if you agree with me on this, just, go ahead and put it in the chat. I agree. And if you feel that, in your own job, feel free to say so. We all find coping mechanisms to one extent or another to deal with extraordinary levels of stress and uncertainty that's on an unceasing basis. That is a healthy, normal thing for us to do, to look for those kinds of coping mechanisms. As it turns out, my favorite coping mechanism at times has been 2 Grey Goose martinis, dirty, extra cold. And I don't recommend that on an ongoing basis, but it has been known to be my go-to once in a while. But here's the thing that I love about being in the cybersecurity arena, and that is you would not be in this career if it were not for the fact that you love the work and you have probably the most interesting job, if not the most stressful job on the planet. So I want to just let you know that I left cybersecurity in 2013 after I was at Russell Investments. It had been quite a year for me. In the space of about 3 months, we had a massive reorganization at Russell. I lost my job along with every other C-level executive in the company. My sister was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and I lost my mom. All of that combined together was sort of like a perfect storm for me. And that was like when I decided this is a good time for me to go do something different. I left in 2013 to pursue this bucket list item that I had, which was to become a hospital chaplain. And there's a long backstory behind that we don't have time for today, but I really loved that work. And I learned a ton about trauma, stress, and moral injury. I worked at major trauma centers and at the VA. And I'm back now working in the tech sector again because of something called the principle of proximity. And what that means is chaplaincy was something that was developed in World War I. And the principle of proximity means that the chaplain does not sit in their field tent, away from the action, waiting for a soldier from the front line to make an appointment. The chaplain goes and sits in the foxhole. And our foxhole is at work. So I'm back to sit in the foxhole and to be with my peeps. And in the last 7 years, since I completed 2,000 hours of supervised clinical training at these regional trauma centers and the VA, I've helped hundreds of men and women find solid footing in the midst of crisis and gain perspective and build resilience. And this is why I'm here now, to help people build that balance, to stay in the game for the long run. I feel that I'm on a mission to help tech professionals, as I mentioned earlier, and especially my favorite cyber professionals, to stay in the careers they love without flaming out, and to develop a set of personal attributes that I call flame proof. So we're going to talk about that in the next 40 minutes. I'm going to give you an understanding of the components of burnout, and then share with you, in the context of this case study, some of the leadership opportunities that you have to make an enormous difference in the lives of your people and for yourself. Now, I want to set the stage about burnout, because there are a lot of articles out there right now that suggest that if you feel burned out, it's time for a vacation. And trust me, I've been there. Burnout is not something that can be fixed by a long weekend or even a 2-week vacation in paradise. I've tried. So the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome that is caused by unmanaged workplace stress. I would expand that, and especially based on the presentation that we just had, it's the workplace now is in the home. So it is not something where we used to have this thing where we'd have workplace stress and we'd have our sanctuary back at the house. That has gone away in COVID. So we have a more serious situation now than we've really ever had before. Here's what I would suggest: if you have a chance to take some notes, this is where you might want to take notes. Also, there is I wrote an anti-burnout guide. It's at www.beanally.today, and you can download a lot of what I'm going to talk about today in a free handbook from there. Okay, so talking about burnout. The first of 4 elements of burnout that I want you to be very aware of. Number 1 is physical exhaustion. Pretty obvious. A lot of us think about that. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you are running on 4 hours of sleep a night, some of you are running on less, you are going to be dealing with exhaustion. A sleep deficit is not something you can make up by sleeping extra on the weekend. And most people truly, truly need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I have fought that statistic all of my life. I am one of those people who wore the badge of honor about how little sleep I needed. And I actually had to go into treatment as part of my burnout recovery to learn how to sleep again. I had a specialist for sleep, and he called me a sleep anorexic. It is, yes, what's sleep? I see that. It's like totally, it's something that many of us have learned that we can kind of like, people get in the elevators like, yeah, man, I only got 2 hours of sleep last night. This has really been a rugged week. And then say 2 hours of sleep. Man, I never got 2 hours of sleep. I haven't been to sleep since Friday. We hear that kind of conversation, and it escalates, and it's not healthy. So I want you to listen to your body. And a lot of us will go into override and skip what our body really needs. But if your body tells you it's tired, it isn't something to ignore or try to power through. Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's one of my favorites, in his 12 Rules for Life, has a rule that says, treat yourself as if you are someone you are responsible for helping. If this applies in all of these areas relating to burnout, you would not require a person in your care to go without the sleep they need for days or weeks or even months. So sleep is a biggie for our community. The other things that contribute to physical exhaustion that are very easy to address if you pay attention to them is hydration, drinking enough water, getting adequate nutrition. And adequate nutrition for us does not consist of Red Bull and coffee and power bars, because we've all done that. We need to learn to breathe. We need to learn to be very conscious of the amount of air that we are inhaling and exhaling. We need to get outside. You need to be, I used to work in black projects where we never saw daylight because we had no windows in the building. Getting outside, seeing the blue sky or the gray clouds, whatever that is. In our case, it's going to be snow soon. Move your body. There's a lot about this in the free download that I told you about. But I want you to care for yourself as you would care for someone for whom you were responsible for helping. The second element, number 2, is emotional exhaustion. And this is trickier because it can sneak up on us, and we are the first to ignore our own emotional health. Physical health, emotional health, both really important. Emotional exhaustion affects both men and women equally. So there's no immunity here, and no one is exempt. For people in caring professions that I saw in the hospital, like clergy, chaplains, and nursing, emotional exhaustion shows up like compassion fatigue. If you are involved in a needy relationship of any kind where you are constantly pouring out energy or using energy without getting a return you will become emotionally exhausted. A child or a family member with special needs is emotionally draining. And we can often find ourselves without the physical energy we need to get an emotional energy refill. I personally find certain things emotionally exhausting, and I need to constrain them. One of them is Twitter. I hang out on Twitter a lot because that's where our peeps are, but there is a lot of emotional drama on Twitter. And as a person in the doom scrolling, that's right. I see that. It's for a person who has a lot of compassion orientation, Twitter can be really exhausting. Being bombarded with the news cycle, if for those people who still tune into that over the past few months, has been emotionally exhausting. Going through relationship difficulties and life cycle shifts, big life cycle shifts, especially when you're doing multiple ones in a year, it's emotionally exhausting as well. And the longer those take, the more chronic it becomes. It can become a habit. Emotional exhaustion is actually something we can learn to incorporate into our lives as the norm. So here's an example of a situation where and this was our situation at AT&T Wireless, there are vulnerabilities and gaps in the institution's infrastructure and software, and you may or may not be told to manage without any necessary resources to fix it. I was fortunate, and I count the AT&T Wireless example as very unique because I was given a blank check to fix it, because there was clearly a big payout at the end if the company was successful. So failure was not an option. And if I could write a blank check to the sky if I needed to get stuff done. That'll never happen again in my lifetime. But most of us don't have that opportunity. And working under those conditions generates a lot of fear. It's like standing under the axe waiting for it to fall. And that is emotional exhaustion. And it is living in a state of fear that is like pouring gasoline on the emotional exhaustion and leads to burnout. I want you to think of your emotional energy like a coffee cup. And you can only work with what's in your cup. And when it's gone, you have to get a refill. If your cup has a huge hole in the bottom, so the coffee just kind of constantly drains out, you have to find what's making that hole and fix it. And how do you fill the hole? Well, that's things like what fills your cup. And this is going to be unique for every individual. What's your jam? Where do you hit your happy zone? What's your happy? Where could you focus? I would define my happy as those times when I have just an entire day has gone by and I didn't hardly notice because I was just having such an amazing time. And the next day I would get up and do it again if I could have it, if I had the chance. For me, my happy is snow skiing and being in the mountains above the tree line. It's the opportunity to be with groups like this and have meaningful conversations. You have to find what it is for you and make sure that you set aside time every week to do those things, even if it's just for an hour or two. And because it's truly as important to your health and well-being as breathing, eating, sex, and sleeping. I have a friend, I do a podcast called the Mojo Maker for Women in Tech podcast. And my friend and collaborator, Dr. Manuel Estruck, he's a psychiatrist and a coach specializing in burnout. And he was on the show with me a few months ago. You can hear his episode there. And his suggestion is that you start with one small change, just one tiny change. Don't, the tendency for a lot of us is, I need to fix something, I'm going to go fix all of it. Don't do that to yourself. Pick a small change that you can make, even if it is, I'm going to set aside 1 hour a week to do whatever I want that makes me happy. And do that change until it becomes part of your normal, and then add another small change. Jesse Itzler, he's married to the founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely, and I had a chance to be in one of his workshops. And one of the things that he does is he does one new habit a month, which means at the end of a year, he's got 12 new habits that change his life. And so I think that makes like a lot of sense. Yeah. And Eric says, listening to a good podcast is a way to de-stress. I agree. Everybody's got something. So find your thing and what it is that makes it work for you. Okay. The third item, we're on the third item out of 4. But the third item on the list is probably the number one contributor to burnout. And I think it's the easiest to control when you know how. But if you don't control it, it's like wildfire in an organization. And I don't know if anybody wants to take a guess what that is. If you have an idea, you can put it in the chat. I don't see any ideas. No. Work volume? Ask the question again. Okay. What is the number one contributor to burnout? I've talked about physical and emotional exhaustion. This one I would say is the most prevalent, particularly in tech communities. And yeah, worried about being fired. Okay. Dr. Lupo, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I would think the most prominent reason for burnout is repetitive. Doing the same thing over and over with no changes or modifications. Yeah,
boredom. And we will talk about that in just a minute. That's a very important piece. And it contributes, I think, it's a contributor to the thing that I would say is the number one. But the number one is cynicism. Cynicism, another way to describe it is that sense that your boss or the CIO or the CEO is a spineless idiot with nefarious intent who won't stand up for what's right. And they're only in their position because they paid someone off along the way. Yeah. That kind of thinking, that is cynicism. And it's the narrative in our head that feeds the belief that it doesn't matter what we do or how well we do it. We are trapped on the hamster wheel of pain, and someone else is profiting off our backs. That belief system is an irrational belief system by definition, but it is very prevalent and it spreads in organizations like crazy. In my organizations, because of that, I had a zero tolerance policy for cynicism. So And that the one reason for that zero tolerance policy was it's insanely contagious. And it spreads through an organization like a Colorado wildfire. So, but cynicism is also a built-in survival skill. It's a survival skill of self-preservation to limit suffering. And suffering happens when your understanding of the rules of life and the way things should be is very different from the reality. And then you can do nothing to change it. So I'm going to tell you again. Suffering is when your understanding of the way the world should be and the reality of the way the world is are very different, and you can do nothing about it. That is the definition of suffering. A lot of people become cynical because life circumstances taught them that the world was grossly unfair and it was an asymmetrical game and they couldn't change it. I want you to think about that in the context of cybersecurity, where we are in an asymmetrical war. We don't have the necessary tools to be in place that are in place to be successful. And we're mostly constrained from being on the offense. We're on the defense all the time. And when bad things inevitably happen, we get blamed. It sounds like, the definition of suffering. I think this is one of the reasons why cybersecurity humor is sort of universally cynical. It also makes me laugh, but it's like this black humor. And it's one reason that cynicism can be rampant in our organizations and spread so easily. So here's what happens, and you can recognize this. People think their bosses are idiots. That's born out of cynicism. People believe they are failures. People adopt a self-protective behaviors to cope with that, and cynicism can be the result. And people become so accustomed to working in a mode of scarcity that they don't have the optimism that allows them to see an abundance of alternate solutions to their particular circumstances. These are all things that when you learn how this works, you can A, check yourself, and B, you can check the people who are around you. It could be your family members. It could be your teenagers. It could be your people in your workplace. It's really helpful to have another person. Don't assume that people can check themselves on these behaviors, because I have a saying that a jar can't read its own label. So when we're caught up in the dynamic of behaviors that we're in self-protective behaviors that can really lead to cynical behavior and burnout, we usually need somebody else to kind of tap us on the shoulder in a very compassionate sort of way and see what they can do to help. So that's something that's why we call everything we do be an ally, #be an ally. It's an enormous opportunity to shine as a leader when situations are not going well in the organization and you can step up and try to help that. So starting right now, I'm going to go through this next part of the presentation in the few minutes we have left. I'm going to give you a few things that you can do. Cynicism is so closely tied to the fourth aspect of burnout, and I think this was already mentioned, the idea of being in this mundane routine and rut of things never changing. Organizational inefficiency is the fourth contributor to burnout. And so I'm going to do something here that's very efficient and kill two birds with one stone by talking about how we can address the issue of cynicism by addressing the organizational inefficiency. So I would call this, you can be a worm leader, worm, W-O-R-M, worm. Worm stands for work on the right things, remove barriers, and make work meaningful. this is what we did at AT&T Wireless that I believe as I had an opportunity to reflect on it over the years following that whole successful. By the way, I don't think I told you this. What we did at AT&T Wireless was in 10 months we re-engineered IT from top to bottom. We went from a 7911 outage call 6 days a week for 2 hours to 0. We deployed defect-free code. This sounds almost unbelievable, but it's exactly what happened. There's a book written about it. And we reduced the identity and access management variabilities in the environment from 38 different systems down to 4. I think we were able to get it down to 4 and 1 system of record. And the incident management and response capability was so precise and accurate that we were the subject of a 6 Sigma study. All of that got done in 10 months, but it's because of these 3 things. We were ruthless about focusing on the right things. About my job was to bust down as many barriers as possible and get others in the organization to help us do that so that our people could get their work done. And also to make sure people never lost sight of the meaningful aspect of what it was that they were trying to do. Okay. So work on the right things. What I would call that is be ruthless about focus to make sure you're working on the right things. And by the way, if anybody wants the cliff notes of this talk, I don't have slides, but I have highlights and cliff notes. I'm happy to share that with you. I'll find a way to work with James to get that to you. Okay, working on the right things. This is the WO in WORM. Leaders who have a clear vision about where the organization needs to go can communicate this well. So I have a rule of thumb. There are no more than 5 components to any strategy. 5 is the limit. 3 is better. Why? Because you want the people in the organization, every single person in the organization, to know what you're working on and why, and to be able to recite the strategy on demand at gunpoint under duress. And I always say at gunpoint because that's the way I used to say it, but today I probably shouldn't say it like that anymore. But that's my point, is that any point in time, I could ask anybody in the organization, why are we doing, what are we doing? What are we focused on? Why are we doing it? And they could tell me. And that was a communication on my part to make that happen. As an example, one of the things, we had a multi-6-figure dollar project. It was a pet project in the wireless organization, wireless network organization. It was underway evaluating a new technology. It did not line up with our new focus on re-engineering for the entire back office and wireless network. And so it was canceled. Not everyone was happy about that decision. It was my decision to make. It left a lot of work on the table. We saved it hopefully for another day. But when we nailed our goal in 10 months, everybody understood why we needed to refocus our attention on the things that were most important to us, and they all felt better about it. Also, part of working on the right things is what I call the 5 questions. I use this all the time. And I heard us talking earlier about fast and slow thinking. This is relevant to that. I believe leaders benefit by asking a lot of questions, by being really curious, not just asking any question, but asking great questions to get to the root cause, because the root cause is where we all need to focus when we're trying to fix something. We waste a lot of time and money in cybersecurity and IT, in my opinion, by working on symptoms, and it frustrates everybody because it doesn't move us forward. And we end up coming back and reworking it again and again and again. That is the most that is a great example of the kind of always doing the same thing over and over again. People need to be trained to do root cause thinking. It doesn't come naturally to us, but if we use this 5 questions part of the culture, it starts people down that path. So as an example, this is one that we had all the time in our reengineering effort. During our SEV 911 outage call every day was, why are we putting this patch on the server? Answer, because the vendor gave it to us. Why did the vendor give it to us? To fix the last outage issue on the server would be the answer usually. And then we would say, how do we know, or why do we know that this is going to fix the problem? And usually the answer that came back from the change management team was because the vendor said so. The next question was key. What would it take to test this and make sure it's what we need? And then that's when the critical thinking would start. We'd have to be able to replicate the fault, and then we'd have to apply the patch to see if it works. And that was, we had to start getting people into a non-reactive mode and into a very thoughtful mode of being deliberate about what was really happening in the environment in order to fix it. This applies to absolutely everything in cybersecurity, including why do people not think that that the company environment is more secure than their home environment? The 5 whys is a great way to pursue that. It's the 5 questions or the 5 whys. It's a 6 Sigma strategy for getting to the root cause of an issue, as I've just kind of described. And we used this in our problem and change management processes to make sure that we understood exactly what kind of variations we were pushing into production. So, yeah, you can use it in any part of the environment. You can use it at home, use it with your family. I see a note here from Dan in the chat. It says, organizational efficiency is probably a number 1 for me. That and the times where I feel stuck in a cyclone of people with shiny object syndrome that move on to some new initiative before the last one was completed successfully or implemented. Yeah. All those weekends of taking one for the team end up wasted. One of the things that happened with us when we started this control environment reengineering, the application dev team, DevSecOps, DevOps, the entire application team was absolutely adamantly opposed to us making these changes in the environment. It drove them bananas. They were so opposed to it, but what ended up happening as we slowly implemented the control environment, like with IDLE and COBIT and everything else, they got their life back. Break fix went away. We stopped having outages. We had defect-free code. We had an entire army in the application world of believers by the time we were done. It is incredible what we can do when we get down to the root cause. Okay. The 5 questions, what it does and why it works is because it slows down our brain, the fast brain, the one that makes quick decisions based on unconscious bias and assumptions from past experience. And as I think most of you know, we have a fast brain and a slow brain, and the fast brain is able to make snap decisions. It's an evolutionary advantage for us that comes from the days we lived on the savannah with saber-toothed tigers. It was an advantage to be able to not have to think about things that had life and death consequences. If you make decisions very easily, you may tend towards fast brain thinking. And here's what I learned in cybersecurity that was critical to my success in being able to convince management to make a decision. You're going to want to write this down. Decisions are made in the limbic system, the same brain structures that are responsible for emotion. This is very important when you're trying to get budget and people to release, make a decision that's going to let you move forward. All decisions are emotional decisions. There is no such thing as a logical decision. The fastest way to slow down a decision is to introduce facts. So the 5 questions slow the brain down and put the process into the part of a brain to the part of our brain that is responsible for rational, fact-based analysis. And I'll tell you, information can bounce around there forever and never come to a conclusion until it moves into the emotional part of the brain. If you want to ensure that your management never makes a decision in a timely way, write this down. If you want to make sure that your management never makes a decision in a timely way, fill your slide decks with facts and figures. I can tell you lots of stories about that. Okay. I'm sorry. I hear a comment. Okay. Okay. So there are lots of times when you're going to want to make a decision very quickly, but it's best for you to use the 5 questions, either to slow yourself down, even if it's just for 5 minutes to go through the thought process, or to slow down a team. It is slow decision making that makes sure that you are working on the right things. And here's the last phrase I would use that probably all of you have heard that fits into here is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You might need to dwell on that for a while to see the wisdom in it. It took me forever. The first time somebody told me that saying, I thought they were nuts. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is removing barriers. So the next thing in the worm is the R is removing barriers. And if you are, here's one of the things I used to say all the time. I learned this at AT&T Wireless in spades. And let me just do a quick check on time. Okay. Please post your questions in the chat. I'll try to get to them as we go through here so we make sure that we get to everybody. If you are a leader, especially in cybersecurity, you must be willing to stick your neck out far enough to lose your head. We have problems that need to be solved that will not be solved by leaders who play it safe. Full stop. Cybersecurity is particularly interesting and challenging because it touches every single person and every single organizational silo in the enterprise. This means, in the AT&T wireless world, we started our project, as I mentioned, with 38 different and independent access management systems and at least 3 systems of record. That meant that we had lost complete control of knowing who had access to what in the company and had no effective way of pulling a report, shutting off access, or passing an audit. And Vincent, you're asking a very good question. I see in the chat, even though some of us are not management, how can we still be a leader to prevent cynicism? Lead by example? Yes. Your state, when you manage your state, is infectious. It will, just like cynicism is infectious, so is a good state. So I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute, a little bit more. Great question. Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with how an identity and access management audit would go, the auditor will go out and randomly select a number of employee names from the access control list in an application or a piece of hardware. Then they follow the trail that proves, doesn't suggest, but proves that the employee went through all of the appropriate approvals and authorizations to get that account, and that the access that they have is appropriate for their current job as it shows up in the HR database. Okay, what does this mean? This means that access management system crosses several organizational silos. It's in IT, where access is usually mediated. It's in the business unit, where the authorization happens by the application owner or the system owner. And it's in HR, where the single system of record for all employees is managed. So you have 3 major elements of the company that it's effectively the entire company that has to be involved in an access management remediation. In order to fix a systemic access management problem, someone has to own the process across all organizational boundaries and end-to-end. And that's the only hope of trying to fix something in a timely and effective way. I've seen many other organizations try to address this separately, and they spin their wheels for years. So it's a pretty gnarly example of what I'm talking about when I, talk about sticking out your neck, because in the case of AT&T Wireless, in the 10 months we had to re-engineer access management across all mission critical applications, the only option was to have a single accountable executive. And the person with the knowledge to make that happen was me. And I'll never forget the night when I was sitting in my apartment and going, I have to do this. It felt a little bit like a death sentence. Did I have the answers to do that in advance? No, I did not. And I knew I could fail spectacularly. I knew that identity and access management was the most likely area for us to have an audit finding that would kill the merger with Singular. So my question for you is, what kind of gnarly barriers are preventing you or your organization from making progress? It's a great time for you to kind of just take stock of a radical reality of what's broken. It doesn't have to be something this big. It can be anything in your career, your work from home life. Everybody's got something. What I want to encourage you is that there are ways to approach that, to take a process approach, to take a success approach, to take an abundance way of thinking and say, there are ways for us to solve this problem. I'm going to find out what they are. So, there are, use your 5 questions, analyze the root cause of the barrier, and then believe that you have the ability to find the solutions. Because I'll tell you, if I can find the solutions for that problem, we can collectively and individually find the solutions for almost anything. You'll look like a genius when you can show what's broken and what fixing it would mean in terms of increased productivity in your organization or improved relationships in your family. And you'll probably also get the assignment to see the project through to completion, but that's okay. It can be done. I want you to write down one more thing. Careers are made in the crucible of crisis. And the Chinese character for crisis is 2 characters put together, the character for danger and the character for opportunity. Okay, the final thing, we're almost done, we're going to talk about before we get to the time for questions is making work meaningful. This gets back to the question we had earlier about being stuck in the hamster wheel of pain or doing something that's just routine and mundane and doing it endlessly. As human beings, we are meaning makers. It is said that the greatest gift you can give another person is meaningful work. This gets back to so much about security awareness and education. If we don't, I heard us talking earlier that we needed to explain why we do things. That is giving it meaning, right? So if we don't know why we have to do something, we will make it up because we abhor a vacuum. We abhor a meaning vacuum. So if you ever find yourself in that situation where you're choosing the meaning for what's going on in the workplace, why don't you just let us know and say yes in the chat? Here's why it's so important to have the meaning. And I'm going to go back and use probably a book that most of us read sometime during our educational journey. And it's the book by Viktor Frankl, who was a German Jewish psychiatrist who was held in Auschwitz. And he wrote, after his release and his ability to survive the Holocaust, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you've never read it, please get a copy. He wrote the book after observing how some souls were able to survive the concentration camps and others perished. And here's my takeaway from his work. This is Karen's synopsis. The meaning that we apply to the same circumstances is unique to each individual. So there's no single meaning and there's no right answer. Meaning is largely tied to our focus and our agency. What that means is I'm in control of how I act and react to my circumstances. That is a choice for me. I am not a puppet on a string. I choose. This is my focus, and it gives me a level of agency, which is so, so, so important for all of us every day. We are not machines. So what I choose, how I choose to act, and it's my choice, how I consciously choose to act, is more important than what I choose to believe. So what does this mean? It means that you have a choice of where to focus your attention. So if you assume that your boss is an idiot when something seems out of whack, you have that choice to make that assumption and assign that meaning. You also have the choice to get curious in a way that enables you to ask great questions. Dr. Jordan Peterson's rule number 9 of life is to assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. And I think that's something we all need to remember every day. I do. What you focus on, what you choose to focus on, is what you will get more of. So in the death camps, in Viktor Frankl's observations, those who focused on their suffering found death an escape from unending suffering. And Frankl observed that those who chose to focus instead, even if it was only for a moment, on the beauty of a blue sky, or even in a death camp, to focus on their values of kindness to another person by sharing a morsel of bread, even though they were starving, were the ones who survived. When I'm assigned a project, like the AT&T wireless project, that seems like it's destined for failure, and particularly my failure, I don't ruminate on the unfairness of that decision, and I think that's key. And as I close up here, I'm just saying all of us have a choice to focus on finding solutions, however small. We have a choice to focus on how we show up each day with curiosity, with optimism, and an understanding that we have things within our sphere of control, and that when we focus on using those things, they grow. What's in your sphere of control, that's what focus there, and it'll expand. We have a choice to focus on making sure that we're in good physical and emotional health, because that is the foundation of everything else that we do. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for this. I hope this was helpful. Thank you that's all the time we have today. And if you would like to continue the conversation, either for yourself or for your organization, feel free to schedule a time with me online, and we'll go from there. Any questions? What happens when the leadership is flat out lying and creating cynicism? Look at Theranos. Yes. So, I don't know if it's Theranos or Theranos or whatever but that is a very interesting question. And
It's Theranos.
Is it Theranos?
Yes.
Yeah. So I spent a fair amount of time in Silicon Valley, in the Silicon Valley culture, and on the fantasy thinking that some people have. And I actually had an opportunity in one of my roles to work for a CEO who had that same kind of tendency to create their own facts to fit their objectives, which was personal wealth. And I will just speak from the standpoint that, yes, it's very important not to feel subject to gaslighting when people tell you that the situation is this and you know that it's not. And that what's important to remember in that kind of a situation is that you do have choice. You have agency. You always have at least two choices. In that case, it would be to stay or to leave. You can always be in charge of how you show up and how you behave with your colleagues. And sometimes the best that we can do is take the long view. Let's just say that there's a situation that that makes it very untenable for someone to leave. I have another story about this, but we don't have time to get into it. If it's a situation where you really like have a set of like platinum handcuffs and you can't leave, and you know that that kind of stuff is going on, then you make a choice about your ethics and your conscience, and you ask yourself the question, what's going to be important to me 10 years from now when this thing has all gone down and I need to live with myself? What will be the important thing? And I think that we've seen people make some of those decisions, and we've disagreed with some of them. Edward Snowden would be one of them. Chelsea Manning would be another, where they made decisions that they felt were very ethical choices that they had to make, and they have to live with the consequences of that. But that's okay, because their values drove their decision, and that's what you're going to have to live with at the end of the day. See if there's any other questions. I don't see any. Let's see. Chat scrolled here. You can just, if you, I think we're almost out of time. I don't see, even though some of us are, okay. No, we got them all, I think.
Yeah, we're pretty well. I haven't seen any new ones come in. But I'm still sitting here just kind of digesting all this information. Wow. Talk about checking the box for professional development. We got the education, and we got that hopefully inspiration to be able to take care of ourselves, and just some incredible information and things for us to kind of take away and just kind of look inside. When we get through this, all I have to say, Karen, is when we get to meet face to face, first round of dirty martinis is on me. So that will certainly be my pleasure. I'm going to drop in the chat. I've got 3 links I want to drop in here real quick to kind of wrap up. The first one, folks, is Karen's link tree that's got the links to her YouTube, those podcasts that she talked about. Also, get a copy of the book. I already got my copy, got it downloaded. I'm part of her emailing list now. So the other one that I want to throw in here real quick, let me share my desktop real quick. Share this screen. Here we go. The other one I want to share real quick, the other link is for our February chapter meeting. I've got the registration open, so you are certainly welcome to go register. And like I said, it's the book club next month. It's going to be really, really cool. Karen, you're welcome to come back too. And Karen touched on a point. My board officers are going to shoot me when I do this, but I don't care because it's me. Cybersecurity humor. So where do web pages go when they're sick? To the urologist.
Oh, no.
Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Yeah. Don't forget to try the veal and tip your waitress. So anyway, I know I'm getting groans and eye rolls and everything else, but it's one of the perks. I always love a good, bad joke. So the other thing I want to make everybody aware of is we have been recording these meetings, and I have been quietly squirreling them away up on YouTube, but they're unlisted. They're kind of in a private thing because of the information sometimes we're sharing. There's the link if you want to be able to go back and look at some of them. I'm not posting this publicly. It's not going on the website. I will share it within meetings, but it's also on our community group page on the ISC Squared community site for our chapter. It's out there as well. It's in this slide deck with the link, and then it's also in the chat if you want to go grab that. But again, a very big thank you to Clay and Mindy for the research and the information regarding work from home and COVID and just the results and the findings that you have. I just thought was really, really interesting. And again, a big thank you to Karen for taking time out of your busy day and sharing your story and your case study with us. Just wow. It certainly something going to have to go back and take my whiskey and do some soul searching and thinking, and it hit home. So again, thank you very much. Again, a big shout out, a big thank you to everybody that was here in attendance. It's interesting when you started, I think when we started the night, at one point I saw we had like 48 people. Karen, when you started your presentation, we started with 43. We're still at 43, so nobody left. Certainly captured everybody. A lot of great comments and information from everybody. For the folks that are going to, that I mentioned earlier about the panel, I'll be in touch with you to talk about the book. I'm going to prep you with the questions for next month, but I'll send out an email. Otherwise, there's the link. Again, thank you everybody for this evening. Great information. Have yourself a wonderful week, and we will see you in February.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, what did Alex just drop in there? Yeah, and we can stop the recording.